There was a time when I thought I had it all figured out, happy, secure, and blissfully unaware. I truly believed my marriage was rock solid. But that illusion shattered the moment I found out my wife, Danielle, had been lying to me, and worse. I'm John Miller, though most of my friends just call me Jay. I'm the kind of guy who's serious about taking care of myself. I'm in the gym 5 days a week, standing 6 feet 3 inches and weighing in at 192 pounds. 8 years ago, I took a leap of faith, walked away from the corporate grind, and built my own company from the ground up. It's been a success. Danielle, meanwhile, works for one of the top 50 companies in the country. She's been there a solid 24 years. A month after we got married, she started out as an OT analyst, and about 5 years back, she moved into a role as a training unit instructor, mostly to stay current with all the tech changes. Her job has her attending at least 20 days worth of educational programs every year. At 46, Danielle still turns heads. She's 5 feet 8 inches, weighs about 118 pounds, and you never guess she's a mom of 2 grown kids. Every morning, like clockwork, she laces up her running shoes and hits a 6-mile route at dawn with 6 other women from the neighborhood. Our daughter, Emily, she's 22 now, just graduated from Florida State. She followed in her mom's footsteps and became a first-grade teacher in Naples. She's been running with Danielle since she was 14. I'm proud of her, especially since she's taken a liking to my homebrewed beer, which has always been a hobby of mine. She even joined a beer club in Naples, and I join her there whenever I can. Then there's our son, Kent, 21 years old and freshly graduated from the University of Florida. He's eager to jump into my business, but I've told him he's got to get at least 5 years of real-world experience in corporate America first. It's the only way to grow, in my opinion. Danielle, for the record, can't stand beer. Hates the smell of it. So, I usually plan my brewing sessions around her business trips, like this current one to Dallas. I just started crafting a batch of English brown ale while she was away. Honestly, I thought life had peaked. Everything felt just about perfect. But then, everything changed. It was last Wednesday, around 8:30 p.m., when my buddy Bobby from the beer club asked me for a ride from the airport. Of course, I said yes. While I was waiting at baggage claim, I spotted 3 people who looked familiar, and then I realized they were Danielle's coworkers. Which made me wonder, where the hell was Danielle? It felt off. I don't usually call her work line, I stick to her personal cell, but this time, I dialed her office number. Her voicemail picked up and said she'd be out of the Dallas office until Wednesday because she was teaching, and then off Thursday and Friday. She wouldn't be back until Monday. Weird. When Bobby showed up, I explained what I saw and how it didn't add up. He suggested I talk to Steve, a fellow beer club guy who also happens to be a detective with the local PD. So I called Danielle. I told her I just wanted to hear her voice. She said she couldn't wait to hug me and was looking forward to falling asleep in my arms Friday night. I asked her if she could come home earlier. She said she had responsibilities to handle and it wouldn't be fair to skip out on them. She reassured me, though, told me she loved me, and promised she'd be home Friday. But that phone call only raised more red flags. That night, I met up with Steve over a beer and told him what was going on. I laid it all out, seeing her coworkers at the airport with luggage, her voicemail not matching her story, and that strange Friday promise. Steve listened closely. He told me to reach out to Frank Jones, someone in a higher-up position who might have more insight. I thanked him and made up my mind to call Frank the next morning. But before I even had the chance, Frank showed up. Turns out Steve had already filled him in. After hearing my story, Frank hit me with a heavy question. Jay, you've been happily married for over 24 years. Are you sure you want the truth? I was taken aback. I asked him why he'd say something like that. He told me, very cautiously, that in his experience, most marriages don't survive situations like this. Then he hit me with a series of tough questions. How much do you really want to know? How far back should we dig? What's your budget for an investigation? Are you prepared for whatever we uncover? I sat there, stunned. I couldn't speak at first. Then finally I said, "I need to know everything." I told Frank. Every last detail, when it started, where it happened, who was involved. I don't care how far back you have to dig. If I've been lied to, I want to know the full extent of it. Frank nodded. We agreed he'd contact a trusted private investigator he knew in Dallas, someone who could start digging into Danielle's recent trips. At the same time, one of Frank's own guys would look into the training schedule she'd supposedly been following. I was also told to reach out to the 3 coworkers I'd seen at the airport, just to verify a few things while we waited on the other pieces to come together. Back at the house, I started combing through everything, hoping to find some clue. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for or where to start. I skipped the living room, dining area, kitchen, and our kids' rooms. Instead, I went straight to Danielle's dresser. But everything looked normal. Familiar. No red flags. Then I moved to her closet. It was filled with boxes, none of them seeming out of place. Still, I checked each one. Nothing. I shifted focus to the bathroom, scanning for anything, notes, receipts, hidden items, but came up empty. With nowhere else to turn, I went back to the closet and took my time. I checked every hanging garment, every shoebox, anything that looked even slightly off. Eventually, I gave up and expanded my search to the guest bedroom, the office, the garage, even the attic. But no matter how hard I looked, I found nothing. No proof. No explanation. By 5 p.m., Frank showed up. He came prepared, with mini surveillance cameras and audio recorders. Within an hour, he had discreetly set them up in the bedrooms, the office, and the kitchen. He even placed a voice recorder in a vent. Then we drove to the airport. It took a little while, but we eventually spotted Danielle's car. Frank popped the trunk and installed a GPS tracker. He also slipped another voice recorder under the front passenger seat, tucked neatly out of sight. Later that night, back at the house, we cracked open a couple of light Alesh while Frank filled me in on what he'd learned. Danielle's classes varied in length, anywhere from 3 to 5 days, depending on the city. For Dallas, the sessions typically ran Monday through Wednesday. The group I saw, Tom, Paul, and Bev, had flown out Sunday and returned Wednesday evening. Apparently, all the teaching materials got shipped to the venue a week in advance. The instructors weren't responsible for setup or transportation. Local staff handled that. I sat there, silent but seething. My thoughts kept drifting to my dad, who always warned me, never make decisions when you're angry. Think clearly. Stay level-headed. But in that moment, it was hard. I was pissed. She'd been lying to me, plain and simple, and there needed to be consequences. I got up and stormed into the kitchen, letting the frustration spill out. "She's been feeding me bullshit this whole time," I snapped. "And for what?" "Just to cover her tracks?" Frank asked if I'd found anything in my search. I shook my head. "No smoking gun. The only thing that stood out was how often she does laundry. Like religiously. That gave us an idea. We decided Frank would intercept her bag when she got back from her trip, see if there was anything telling inside. Meanwhile, I disabled the washing machine just long enough to keep her from scrubbing away any potential evidence the moment she walked in the door. Before Frank left for the night, he mentioned that his contact in Dallas had already checked into Danielle's hotel. He was planning to speak with the staff first thing in the morning, then call me with an update. After Frank left, I couldn't bear the thought of sleeping in our bed. I crashed in Kent's room instead. Not that it helped, I barely slept a wink. The next morning, I forced myself to keep to my routine. I went to the office and tried to focus on work, but my mind kept spinning. Frank and I agreed to meet again at my place that afternoon. At exactly 2 o'clock, he showed up with a thick folder in hand. It was a report from his guy in Dallas, complete with photos. Frank pulled one out. It showed 6 people gathered around a table at some restaurant. 3 men. 3 women. All sitting in pairs. "Recognize anyone?" he asked, sliding the photo toward me. I stared at it. My pulse kicked up. The only one I recognize for sure is Danielle, I finally said. Frank handed me separate, close-up shots of each person at the table. I took my time with them. Slowly, carefully, I studied each face. Then, after a long pause, I handed one of the photos back. I told Frank the guy in the photo looked oddly familiar, but I just couldn't place him. I had that nagging feeling, like I'd seen him before but couldn't remember where. As we sat down to eat, Frank shared something interesting. Apparently, surveillance cameras had been installed on every floor of the hotel, pointed toward the corridors. We started going through another batch of photos, this time showing Danielle's group leaving the restaurant, getting into the elevator, and then stepping out on the 7th floor. The women all went into room 7007. The men went into 7009. Then, on Friday morning at exactly 10:29 a.m., 2 men were photographed leaving room 7009. A few shots later, we saw them exiting the elevator, walking down the hallway, and heading out through the hotel's front entrance. Frank pointed out that from what the pictures showed, their interaction seemed more professional than personal. Apparently, they had lunch together nearby, but each paid their own tab. Later, more surveillance footage captured them with luggage, leaving their rooms, riding the elevator down, and stopping by the front desk separately to check out. Then Frank turned to me, his face serious. "Are you sure you want to know everything?" he asked. Without hesitating, I said, "Yes. All of it." He locked eyes with me for a moment, then nodded and continued. That's when he handed me another folder, this one filled with details I hadn't expected. He didn't walk me through every word, but I understood the basics. His team in Dallas had entered both rooms, 7007 and 7009, alongside hotel housekeeping. They documented everything. Turns out, those rooms were connected by an interior door. To gather evidence, they stripped the bedsheets and sent them to a lab for DNA testing. They collected used glasses for fingerprints. Even the trash was combed through for clues. According to the agent's notes, the rooms smelled heavily of body products and perfume, and there were signs of activity on all 4 beds. We wouldn't know for sure what Danielle's role in all this was, whether she was actively involved or just an observer, until the lab tests came back. But based on everything we'd seen so far, Frank and I both felt pretty certain she wasn't just a bystander. It was gut-wrenching. Seeing this kind of deceit from the woman I'd spent over 2 decades loving? It was almost too much to take in. With Danielle scheduled to return that night, we made a quick plan. Step 1. Keep her from washing her clothes the moment she got home. Frank and I pulled out the washing machine and disconnected a wire from the motor. A small thing, but it gave me something to focus on. Maybe that was Frank's way of helping me breathe through it all. Later in the kitchen, Frank brought up something that caught me off guard. "We should also take a DNA sample from you," he said, "and see if we can get a strand of hair from each of your kids." I blinked. "Wait, you think you're saying Kent and Emily might not be mine?" He looked at me carefully. "You asked for the whole truth, Jay. This is part of it." I didn't argue. I just nodded. We found an old comb for each of them, something used before their first haircuts. We only needed 1 strand per person. Frank labeled each carefully, mine as sample 1, Kent's as 2, Emily's as 3. Danielle's came from a brush in her bathroom, we marked that as 4. All of it would be sent to the lab first thing in the morning. Frank even had someone at the airport trying to intercept her luggage under the pretense of a missing bag, anything to stall her. With that out of the way, we shifted the conversation to something harder, how I should act around Danielle once she walked through that front door. Could I smile? Hug her? Kiss her like nothing had changed? Could I sit through her made-up stories about the trip? Could I take her to dinner tomorrow and pretend I wasn't slowly unraveling inside? Could I even be physically close to her without losing it? Frank reminded me, it might take months for everything to come to light. Would I be able to keep my cool for that long? I took a deep breath and promised I could. I had to. Because the truth, no matter how painful, was all I cared about now. Frank then asked if I could arrange a short business trip. 3 or 4 days. Something that wouldn't raise suspicion. I sat back and thought for a second, thinking about where I could go, who I could visit. And then I smiled, staring off toward the ceiling. I told Frank I was planning to visit one of my longtime clients in St. Louis. I'd let Danielle know about the trip Monday morning, and I'd say I'd be back Thursday afternoon. Curious, I asked Frank why he wanted me out of town in the first place. He explained that if Danielle was hiding anything, she might get comfortable while I was away, drop her guard a little. If she felt like no one was watching, she might slip up and do something careless. He had a hunch that she'd had a great weekend and might be itching to reconnect with whoever she was seeing. Unfortunately, there were no cameras in her office, so we couldn't track her there. But we started wondering, was there something she always had with her? Something we could bug? After thinking it over, I suggested her briefcase. She took it everywhere. Frank admitted it wasn't the perfect setup, but it was better than nothing. He handed me a tiny audio bug and told me to attach it that evening. Then he looked at me and asked, "You ready for the show?" I just said, "Yeah." As he turned to leave, he gave one last piece of advice. "If you get the chance tonight or tomorrow morning, check her underwear. Look for any kind of liquid stains. Could be something." Then he gave me a nod. "Good night. If you need to talk this weekend, call me. And remember, stay calm." That night, I sat out on the back terrace with a porter in hand, trying to clear my mind. Besides the fact that Danielle was planning to do laundry early Saturday, nothing she'd done since returning had raised any alarms. Just before sunrise, my phone buzzed. It was Frank. He told me her luggage had been successfully delivered to the lab. That part of the plan was going smoothly. Then he reminded me, no matter what came next, I had to keep my cool. Sure enough, at dawn, Danielle came home. She looked exhausted, travel-worn, and a little irritated. Apparently, the airline had messed up her baggage. 2 new pairs of pants were missing, and she was visibly annoyed, but also relieved that the essentials had made it into her carry-on. She hugged me like she meant it, tight, familiar, like she missed me. Told me she was so glad to be back home, that she hated being away from me. We shared a soft kiss, then she went upstairs to run herself a bath. While she soaked, I took the opportunity to slip the bug into her briefcase. It was small, well hidden, and I doubted she'd ever notice. Then I flopped down in front of the TV, trying to quiet the emotional storm inside me. Danielle's return had felt sincere. Tired or not, she'd been affectionate. Warm. She looked like someone who genuinely missed her husband. For a second, I questioned everything. Was I wrong? Was I letting paranoia run my life? But then I reminded myself, I had a job to do. I had to hold this line until the truth came out. After her bath, I went upstairs to join her. Something about her calm, post-travel demeanor made me feel like I needed to step up, to be the husband she deserved. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe it was just the last gasp of hope that this all might turn out to be some huge misunderstanding. Saturday morning came and went. I figured she must have overslept, because there was no rush to get laundry started. Before my own shower, I found myself standing in front of the laundry hamper. I don't even know what pulled me toward it. Maybe something Frank said, maybe just curiosity. I started to sift through her underwear. I felt weird, like I was trespassing in her privacy, violating something intimate. But I kept looking. I'm no expert, but nothing jumped out at me. No red flags. No visible signs of anything unusual. After I showered, I made some coffee, grabbed the newspaper, and waited for her to come downstairs. By my 3rd cup, Danielle walked into the kitchen wearing a robe, still towel damp and smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. "Good morning, sleepyhead," I said, trying to sound light. "You look like you could take on the whole day." She chuckled, said she'd love a cup of coffee, and I handed one over. "Maybe I should mess up your luggage more often," I joked. "If it means I get a weekend like this." She laughed again, genuinely, and we had breakfast together in what felt like total peace. Afterward, I headed outside to knock out a few chores. A couple of hours later, she mentioned needing to go to the store and asked if I needed anything. I smiled and shook my head. No thanks, I'm good. While she was out. That Saturday evening, we had dinner at our favorite Italian spot. It felt familiar, comforting. Over pasta and wine, we got into a lively conversation about the past week. I shared some bits from my recent trip to St. Louis. She smiled, said she was glad to be home, even though the travel had wiped her out. She mentioned that if her missing luggage didn't show up by Wednesday, she'd head out after work to shop for replacements. Thankfully, she didn't seem too upset, except for those 2 pairs of pants she'd owned forever. Hopefully no one finds out, she said with a half-smile. I just grinned back and launched into a long-winded update about my latest batch of English brown ale. She listened, nodding, sipping her drink. By the end of the night, we wrapped things up and headed home. Before leaving for St. Louis, I had managed to bottle up 2 cases of my homemade beer. The drive itself was over 8 hours, but honestly, I didn't mind. I've always loved long drives. It gives me time to be alone with my thoughts. Usually, those thoughts circle around business. But this trip, all I could think about was Danielle. At some point along the road, I called Frank. I filled him in on my weekend, but he didn't have any new intel. He promised to stay in touch. Time flew. Before I knew it, 4 hours had passed. I called Frank again, this time more direct. Tell me straight, I said. What's your gut say? There was a pause. Then Frank told me he'd spoken with Joe, his contact in Dallas, and they were both convinced. Danielle had been involved in multiple affairs over a long period of time. We've seen hours of intimate behavior, Jay, he said. You don't just sit through that many close encounters unless you're a participant. She didn't just watch. There's no way. Frank continued. The body language between them, it's too relaxed. Too confident. They didn't cling to each other, didn't act sketchy. They split into separate rooms without looking suspicious. That kind of composure, it takes years to build. He was honest with me. He said, I know you're not going to like this. But you asked for the truth. He told me that their guy in Dallas had observed how tight-knit the group was. They talked about work, families, openly, comfortably. Everyone paid for their own meals, made sure not to sit beside the same person twice, rotated conversations like they'd done this 100 times. They were deliberate about it, coordinated even. Frank summed it up. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment fling. This is a group with a history. A long one. They played it cool in public, but when the doors closed, the parties turned wild. His final advice that night hit hard. You need to decide, Jay, what are you going to do about Danielle? And what about the rest of that group? That conversation shook me. I hung up and immediately called my lawyer, Michael Davidson, probably the best divorce attorney in the state. I gave him the basics, and he assured me that his associate, Dave Ford, would be in touch shortly. Once I got settled in my hotel room, I called Tanya just to let her know I'd arrived safely in St. Louis. Then I rang Fred to confirm our tea time. Later that night, around 9:30, Frank checked in again. I let him know I'd already passed his name along to Michael and that he should expect a call from Dave. Frank laughed. Well, he said, Dave Ford's reputation alone should rattle any lawyer Danielle tries to hire. I was exhausted. I wanted this whole thing over. But if they wanted to keep playing games? I was ready. More than ready. On Tuesday, I spent the whole day out on the golf course with Fred. It helped take my mind off things. Then, Wednesday afternoon around 1 o'clock, Frank called to check my schedule. I told him I was free the rest of the day and planned to drive back home Thursday morning. By 2 o'clock, Dave Ford called. We had a good talk. I filled him in on everything. Hearing his voice, hearing his confidence in the case, it brought a wave of relief. He spoke highly of Frank and his firm, said they were top-notch. Then he asked me the big question. What do you want to do, if Danielle's guilt is confirmed? I didn't hesitate. If she's been unfaithful, I said, I want a divorce. But even that didn't feel like the full weight of what I was carrying. Not yet. For now, all I could do was wait for Frank's team to wrap up their investigation. But Dave and I agreed. It was time to start laying the groundwork for divorce, with infidelity as the foundation. We also discussed gathering more evidence during Danielle's upcoming training sessions, and how I'd need to maintain the illusion of a normal, functioning life for the next few months. Dave told me that in Georgia, I could technically file for a quick no-fault divorce. But accusing her of adultery would give me a stronger position, especially with our kids being adults and out of the custody equation. That got me thinking. If I wanted to come out of this with some measure of justice, or closure, I'd need to be strategic. I couldn't let emotion dictate every move, no matter how much it burned inside me. Later that evening, around 9 p.m., I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. But when I opened it, there they were, Steve and Frank. My eyebrows shot up. "What's going on?" Frank had that look, grim, serious. "I didn't want to share this over the phone," he said. "Steve doesn't know the full details, but I figured you might need a friend here tonight. It's up to you whether he stays or not." Even though I had no idea what was coming, something in me said I shouldn't face it alone. I nodded. "Let him stay." We all sat down. Frank looked me in the eyes and got right to it. The test results were back. The evidence was conclusive. Danielle wasn't just present during those hotel stays, she was an active participant. DNA and trace materials proved she had been sexually involved with all 3 men. In fact, one of the beds had clear evidence of all 6 people being involved. Every woman. Every man. Same bed. "She didn't just cross a line," Frank said quietly. "She obliterated it." I just sat there stunned, staring blankly. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My ears were ringing. My mouth was dry. I closed my eyes and tried to find some sliver of calm inside the storm, to hold off the rage that was slowly building like a fire behind my ribs. Then I opened them. "I can't believe this," I whispered. "She was with 5 other people." Frank hesitated, then gave a short cough, like he was trying to clear the next bombshell from his throat. "There's more, Jay." He paused. 2 of those men are Kent and Emily's biological fathers." I shot up from my chair. "What?" My voice cracked the silence like a gunshot. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. I started pacing the room, wild-eyed, trying to make sense of what I just heard. "My kids, they're not even mine." Frank nodded slowly. "The DNA samples matched. There's no mistake." I couldn't wrap my head around it. This wasn't just betrayal. This was my entire life collapsing in front of me. Danielle had been living a double life for over 2 decades. She lied to me, manipulated me, kept me in the dark while raising children that weren't even mine. Steve and Frank sat quietly, letting me move through the tidal wave of emotion, shock, disbelief, confusion. Then grief. Loss. Then anger. Pure, searing rage. And finally, something colder. Resolve. I was done being the victim. Frank had clearly planned this trip not just to deliver the news but to stop me from doing something reckless. And now I understood why. When I finally calmed down enough to sit again, we got to work. We talked through the next steps, laid out my legal position, and focused on what had to be done. Danielle would answer for this. All of it. Despite barely sleeping, having Steve and Frank there helped. I don't think I could have even driven a car in the state I was in. With the truth laid bare, it was time to pick the most powerful, deliberate measures to move forward. The evidence we had would make a divorce not just painful for Danielle, but public. Loud. Humiliating. And honestly, that felt right. I had to accept that I wasn't getting out of this without some embarrassment of my own. Once the truth came out, that Emily and Kent each had different biological fathers, it wouldn't stay hidden for long. Eventually, people would know. And with that, Danielle's betrayal would be exposed in full view. In Georgia, either spouse can file for a no-fault divorce. It's a fairly quick process, file, wait 30 days, finalize, divide the property. But if you file on the grounds of infidelity, things get a lot messier. The court process drags on for months, and you need solid evidence just to get a hearing date. As much as I wanted to take Danielle to court and watch her squirm under cross-examination, Steve, Frank, and Dave all pushed for a no-fault route. They argued it would be faster, cheaper, and still allow me to humiliate her, and her partners, in the right way. Publicly. So now, I just had to decide when to pull the trigger. Back in Atlanta, we gathered in Frank's conference room, me, Steve, Frank, and Dave, laying everything out on the table. What we knew, what we still needed, and what it would take to get the rest. Our end goal was justice, plain and simple. I turned to Frank. Did Danielle do anything sketchy while I was away in St. Louis? He shook his head. No inappropriate calls. No strange movements. She's been careful. Then he told me something unexpected. They'd been able to track this group of 6 over the past 5 years. Apparently, 2 of the members frequently booked hotel rooms next to each other. The pairs varied, but the group often included all 6 of them. Sometimes it was just 4, usually 1 woman and 3 men. They swapped in and out, rotated the combinations like some disgusting system they'd perfected over time. I felt sick. I didn't expect things to run this deep. The rage came fast. I slammed my palm on the table, hard enough to rattle the coffee mugs. This isn't some random cheating, I said, nearly yelling. This is a damn syndicate. I demanded a full investigation, every single member of that group, Danielle included. I wanted names, marital status, kids, addresses, where they worked, everything. I wanted to know if these other women were also lying to their husbands, raising kids that might not even be theirs. I needed the truth, not just about Danielle, but the whole rotten mess. Frank had already pulled Danielle's schedule and used it to start mapping out their upcoming training locations. From that, he built a plan: covert surveillance, audio bugs, hidden cameras in the hotel rooms. None of it would hold up in court, of course, but that wasn't the point. We didn't need it for legal reasons. We needed it to corner her emotionally, force her into a guilt-free divorce. Leave no room for denial. One thing in Danielle's calendar jumped out. She had exactly 3 more classes scheduled before our 25th wedding anniversary. Our anniversary fell on a Sunday. Her last class? Ended that Friday. It all clicked for me right then. Our anniversary wouldn't be a celebration. It would be the end of the line. I decided I wouldn't be attending any dinner or ceremony. There would be no heartfelt speeches, no carefully wrapped gifts. I didn't want her anniversary present. I didn't want her lies wrapped in a bow. That weekend, I'd stop being the naive, faithful husband. And she'd finally start living the fallout of every lie she'd fed me for the past 24 years. She would regret the day she ever met me, not because I was cruel, but because I gave her everything, and she threw it away. A week later, we regrouped, this time in Dave's office. We were all there, waiting for the next wave of updates from Frank. As I settled into my seat, I found myself reflecting on the wild, painful journey we'd all been dragged through. The group, what we'd come to call the Gang of 6, had names now. Real faces. Real lives. There was George C. Thomas from Richmond, Virginia. Henry S. King from Little Rock, Arkansas. Charles K. Chuck Nixon from Columbia, South Carolina. Joyce D. Hopkins from Miami, Florida. Catherine G. Williams from Knoxville, Tennessee. And, of course, Danielle. Fate brought them together more than 24 years ago, during a new hire training program for their organization. And from there, it never stopped. The Wednesday of Danielle's final class arrived. We were all back in Frank's conference room, me, Frank, Steve, and Dave, ready for whatever bombshells were about to hit. Frank wasted no time. The week prior, in Washington, Danielle and Henry had rooms right next to each other. The other 4 were scattered across different floors. But even with the distance, patterns were emerging. Danielle and Henry were practically inseparable. They spent all day and most of the evening together. But once 10 p.m. rolled around, everyone started trickling back to their rooms, quietly, carefully. No woman ever entered Henry's room. No one ever saw a simultaneous exit from those adjacent rooms. But around 2 a.m., people started filtering back from wherever they'd been. Except on Thursday. That night, all 6 of them stayed in a cluster of adjacent rooms. No subtlety. No effort to hide it. They were together the whole night. Out in public, they kept up the facade, talking shop, chatting about work, their kids, meals, travel. Just colleagues, laughing over dinner, going to a game, talking about their children's classes. But behind those closed doors, it was a different world. Frank's team, disguised as hotel staff, managed to get in again, just like before. Luckily, all the activity seemed to take place in adjacent rooms, which made it easier to gather evidence, hair samples, fingerprints, and other traces. The DNA results told us everything. George? He was Emily's biological father. Chuck? He was Kent's. The reality was gutting. Danielle had slept with so many men, so often, without protection, that paternity couldn't even be pinpointed without lab tests. She'd kept up these affairs for so long, across so many years, that even she probably didn't know who fathered her children. In Richmond, George had been married for 24 years. He had 2 adult kids. He had no idea he also had a daughter in Florida. Henry, in Arkansas, was also married, 23 years. He had twin boys, both 21. And Chuck? He'd been with his high school sweetheart for 25 years. They had a son together. Now, he was about to discover he also had a child with Danielle. Joyce Hopkins from Miami was happily married, preparing to celebrate her own 25th anniversary. She had a 23-year-old son and a 21-year-old daughter. And Catherine Williams from Knoxville? Married 23 years, with 2 girls and a boy. All 6 of them, every single one, had been married for more than 2 decades. They all played the role of devoted spouses while maintaining this web of deception. Well, all except Chuck. He just learned his own wife had been unfaithful too. It was unclear how deep that rabbit hole went. Frank's team was still looking into whether any of the men might be the biological fathers of Joyce or Catherine's kids. At least one probably was. And their husbands deserved to know. Frank said he hoped to have results by next Wednesday. He didn't say how he'd break the news, or whether he even would. During a brief check-in at Dave's office, Frank added that Danielle's upcoming class in Orlando was only 3 days long. Which made the next part sting even more. The group had already planned to spend Thursday and Friday, right before our 25th wedding anniversary, together. That sealed it for me. The utter disrespect Danielle was showing, it was beyond repair. She didn't just cheat. She orchestrated it. She weaponized secrecy. And she was still at it, even now, planning one last hurrah, right before the day she was supposed to celebrate our marriage. As I started to feel my blood boil again, Frank cut in, reminding me that. Turns out, I'm not the only one raising kids that aren't biologically mine. Henry, he's the biological father of both Joyce's daughter and Catherine's son. George? He's Emily's real dad. And Chuck? One of Catherine's daughters is his. Believe it or not, Joyce is the only woman in the group who actually has at least one child with her husband. Yeah, it's a mess. Like, I'm seriously thinking about making a flowchart just to keep track of who fathered who. It's almost surreal. Even though I've already accepted that my marriage is over, and cycled through every stage of grief, I've somehow found the strength to keep pretending. I still play the role of the affectionate husband, though now it feels more like a twisted performance. It's a game to me now. A long, drawn-out act before the final curtain drops. If Danielle could lie to my face for 24 damn years, I figure I can fake being a forgetful, affectionate, slightly oblivious husband for a few more months. Frank's team was getting ready to repeat the whole operation in San Diego. Same tactics, same protocols. Just like in Washington, they'd collect evidence down to the smallest detail. They were confident everything would go down exactly the same way. I had no doubts either. Honestly? I couldn't wait for Orlando. I was practically giddy thinking about how I'd turn their little reunion into a disaster they'd never forget. Catherine wasn't able to make it to San Diego, but she and the rest of the group were all planning to be in Orlando. Since those training sessions only lasted 3 days, we knew all 6 would be there. And with no other colleagues around, it gave us space to move, freely and strategically. Danielle had already made her choice. She picked them over me. She was choosing to spend the lead up to our 25th wedding anniversary getting cozy with her little club instead of rushing home to her so-called soulmate. What she didn't know: I'd already arranged to be their surprise instructor on Wednesday afternoon. I'd be the one teaching their final session. And I'd be doing it with a full audience of students, just in time for the gang of 6's last public appearance together. Dave Ford and his legal team were prepped and ready. The moment I gave the signal, the paperwork would be filed. Frank had his crew in place too, tailing the group, recording every move, every whisper. The stage was set. But I wasn't done yet. After the foundation was laid, I reached out to the other spouses, the husbands and wives who had no idea their lives were about to be flipped upside down. I told them I was planning a surprise in Orlando to honor my 25th wedding anniversary and to celebrate 25 years with the company. Since all of their spouses joined the company the same year, I pitched it as a shared celebration. I booked flights for each of them. Everything was arranged, they just had to show up at the gate. Then came the hardest part. I called Kent and Emily. I told them I had something important to share and asked them to meet me in Orlando on Tuesday night. When they arrived, I sat them down and laid it all out, the truth, the evidence, what I'd learned about their mother, what I planned to do. We talked for hours. We cried. I told them that even though I might not be their biological father, I would always be their dad. That would never change. We hugged. We sobbed. The kind of grief that rips you apart and leaves you raw. They asked questions, some painful, some impossible, and I answered every one of them the best I could. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I begged them not to tell my mother. They promised. Then, looking them both in the eye, I asked if they'd stand by me the next day. I told them I was going to confront their mom, in front of her colleagues, and I wanted them there. I admitted that what they'd see might hurt, might confuse them. But it was important. Soon, the news would break. The truth about their parentage would be out. The Atlanta papers would have a field day. Shame would fall on all of us, me, them, her. But if they were willing, they could see it firsthand. The moment everything collapsed. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something new. I told them plainly, what I might say during the confrontation could be deeply embarrassing. But no matter what comes out of my mouth, it won't change the way I feel about them. Nothing ever will. They're adults now, so legally I can't adopt them. But if I could, I wouldn't hesitate for a second. I love them both like my own, and that love is unconditional. Whether they decide to be there tomorrow or not is entirely up to them. She's still their mother, after all. Take your time, I said. Think it through. But know this, I'll love you both, always. That's not changing. Kent looked up at me with glassy eyes. Dad, I know Mom loves you, and I know you love her. Is there any chance you could forgive her? Maybe you both could go to a counselor and try to work through this? That one hit hard. I kept my voice steady, but inside I was shaking. How do you respond calmly to something so naive? I looked at them and realized they were still kids in a way. Kids who grew up believing in their parents' love. Kids who wanted everything to stay whole. Of course they did. I took a deep breath. Close your eyes, I told them. Let me walk you through something. Imagine you've met the love of your life. This amazing person who makes you feel whole. You marry them, start your journey together, and everything feels perfect. You build careers. You have 2 beautiful children. You create a life that revolves around love, support, and shared dreams. You coach their games, attend every recital, plan romantic getaways, celebrate anniversaries, hold them close at night. And every day, you look at your family and feel like you hit the jackpot. You thank God for what you have, knowing that this is what life is all about. I paused, letting the weight of it settle. No, I said slowly. Imagine you're watching a movie. The woman you love, your wife, is in a hotel room. There are 3 men and 2 other women. They laugh. They play a game. And when it's your wife's turn, she draws the ace of spades. Her face lights up. Joy. Kent, if that was your wife, would you still believe she loved you? Could you still trust her? I turned to Emily. And what if your husband was one of the men in that room? How would that make you feel? Could you forgive? Would therapy be enough? The room was quiet except for the sound of Emily's sobs. Kent's eyes brimmed with tears. They were trying to process it, to make sense of something senseless. I continued, gentler this time. What if I told you they didn't just make one video like that, but one every year? 4 times a year. For 24 years. And what if I told you that right now, just a kilometer from here, they were filming another one? I let that hang in the air. Then I dropped the final blow. I've got over 40 hours of recordings from the last 3 trips alone. Everything. Documented. Preserved. My voice cracked. Now imagine finding out you're not the biological parent of your own kids. Or worse, that your spouse fathered someone else's child. How would that feel? I wasn't trying to hurt them. I just needed them to understand the depth of it all. The betrayal. The loss. I could see it sinking in, the heartbreak, the shame, the confusion. Their world was unraveling, just like mine had. But they deserved the truth. No matter how much it hurt. I painted the picture clearly for them. Imagine this, I said. The person you love most in the world, your partner, the mother of your children, decides to cut her trip home short. Not because of work. Not because of an emergency. But so she can sneak in one more night of fooling around with a group of coworkers. And then, instead of coming home to the family she says she loves, she tacks on another 2 days just to keep the party going. When she finally does walk through the door, she's so exhausted from whatever she was doing, she needs a full day to recover before she can even pretend to care about you again. I looked straight at them. Now tell me, how much love, respect, or care do you think she really has for me? Or for either of you? Kent's face was pale. He was struggling to hold it together. I never thought about it that way, he whispered. You're right. I wouldn't want my wife to treat me like that. I just never imagined Mom would choose them over us. He looked at me, tears building again. I love you, Dad. I don't know if I can be there tomorrow, but I'll let you know. I'm really sorry you're going through this. And if my husband ever pulled something like this, he'd get a serious kick where it hurts. Emily, always more direct, turned to me with wet eyes and said, Thank you for being such a good father. I love you. Kent, he's acting like Mom, thinking about himself first. But I'll be there tomorrow, Dad. And it's about time Kent started acting like a grown-up. That one stunned Kent. Honestly, it stunned me too. But her fire? Her raw loyalty? I loved her even more in that moment. She asked me what tomorrow would look like. I explained everything. I've invited the spouses of all 6 members of that group. They think they're coming to a surprise party to help celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary. I figured since they've spent so many years with Danielle, it made sense they'd be part of it. You 2 are the only ones who know what's actually going on. I want this to be a complete surprise. I'm going to show them the evidence, everything I've gathered. And then I'm going to step back and let them decide how to respond to the people who betrayed them. Oh, and by the way, I added, half sarcastic, you've got some step-siblings out there now. Might be nice to meet them someday. We all met up with the other spouses at the hotel. It was oddly calm, almost friendly, as we shared a meal and introduced ourselves. By 2 p.m., our whole group, Kent included, made our way to the hotel where Danielle's class was being held. When we walked into the lobby, everyone else was already there, Dave's lawyer, one of Frank's team members, and a seasoned videographer. A florist showed up at 2:30 with a stunning bouquet of 25 red roses I'd ordered. Emily and the other women were visibly impressed. Emily's eyes burned with focus. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a reckoning. I could tell she was more than ready. I smiled and told her, "It's all under control." At 2:45 sharp, we made our move. Emily led the charge, Kent right behind her. I followed, roses in hand, my heart pounding but my face calm. At exactly 3 p.m., I stepped into Danielle's classroom with John Manning and his video camera close behind. She spotted me and froze. Her face turned crimson, panic, guilt, recognition all wrapped into one. I walked in smiling, holding the bouquet. "Wow," I said, grinning. "That blush goes perfectly with the roses." The whole room laughed. Trying to maintain composure, Danielle turned to the class and introduced me as JT, my beloved husband. I scanned the room. Just like I predicted, the other 5 members of her group were there, sitting separately, acting casual. But I could see it. The tension. The nerves. Turning back to her, I told her that I knew this was the last day of class. And before everyone left, I wanted to ask for their help in making this day unforgettable for Danielle. I announced, with perfect timing, that this Sunday we'd be celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary. And right on cue, Emily walked in with the other spouses. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The photographer caught the exact moment Danielle's face collapsed. She was stunned. The rest of the group? They looked like deer caught in headlights. Emily stepped forward with a smile that could cut glass and began introducing Danielle to the spouses of her little study group. Her tone was polite, but her eyes were on fire. I stood back, proud, watching the storm I had summoned start to rage. And it was only just beginning. I told the room that next month, Danielle would be celebrating her 25th work anniversary with the company. 2 big milestones, our 25th wedding anniversary and her career achievement, happening back to back. Seemed kind of poetic, in a twisted way. I mentioned how George, Henry, Chuck, Joyce, and Catherine all joined the company around the same time as her. So, to make it a truly memorable occasion, I'd invited their spouses to join us here today. Then I added, with just the right amount of smugness, that John was recording this special event for posterity, so if anyone wanted to say a few words on camera before leaving, now was the time. After a deep breath, I felt my heart finally settle a bit. I looked around at the so-called Gang of 6. For over 2 decades, they played their games behind our backs, thinking they were untouchable. Well, not today. I called George, Henry, Chuck, Joyce, and Catherine to step forward. They hesitated, but eventually made their way to the front of the room, earning a polite round of applause from the unsuspecting participants. Emily stepped up beside me. I could feel the energy radiating off her, anticipation, maybe even vengeance. I squeezed her hand and led her over to George. Speaking calmly, I introduced him. "Everyone, this is George Thomas. He's Emily's biological father." Danielle went white as a sheet. Her eyes locked on mine, and she looked like a ghost. George's wife just stared, stunned. "What did you say?" I repeated it. "George is Emily's biological father." George sputtered, trying to find his voice. Why would you say that?" I held up my hand, and Dave's lawyer passed me a small stack of documents. I handed George the first one. "That's a petition for a court-ordered paternity test." Then the second. "This one's a lawsuit. I'm suing you for 21 years of unpaid child support and compensation for emotional damages." And finally, the third. "And this here? It's a lawsuit against your employer for violating moral conduct clauses in your contract." I turned to George's wife and said, "I've made copies of everything for you. Use them however you want." The room erupted. Confusion. Gasps. Some people looked like they might throw up. Then Kent walked over to me, stood tall, and gave me a firm nod. No words, just a quiet look of respect. It was all I needed. I was proud. I turned to Chuck and went through the exact same process. "Kent," I said, "this is Charles Nixon, your biological father." The room froze again. Chuck's name echoed around the space like a gunshot. I handed him the paperwork, same as before. His wife asked if she could get copies too. I assured her. You already have them. When it finally sunk in that Danielle had only ever given birth to 2 kids, each with a different man, there was a strange calm, like everyone was absorbing the shock together. I smiled to myself. No way the rest of them were getting off easy. Danielle sat down, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. I announced to the room. I know this was unexpected. But believe me, we're just getting started. You could hear a pin drop. Taking a breath, I dropped the next bombshell. For the past 5 months, we've been investigating. Donna, along with Jones, Catherine, George, Chuck, and Henry, all scheduled classes together, not to teach or train, but to skip their real jobs and party. This little act has been going on for over 2 decades. People were in shock. I kept going. Let's lay it all out. Henry's the biological father of Joyce's daughter and Catherine's son. Emily? George's daughter. Catherine's oldest daughter? George's. Kent? Chuck's son. And Joyce's son, the only one actually fathered by her husband. Of the 7 kids these 3 women had, only one was actually from their husband. The room exploded in chaos. Yelling. Crying. Absolute mayhem. I won't get into every detail from that moment forward, just imagine a courtroom drama, only way more personal. Every spouse got a full packet of evidence, DNA, videos, emails, hotel logs. Everything. Then I turned to Danielle, handed her the divorce papers, and said calmly but firmly, Do not contact me. Do not come home. Do not try to see me again. I told her exactly how betrayed I felt. How disgusted I was. Then I walked away. Back at the hotel, I sat in silence, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. The weight of 25 years hit me all at once. That's when Emily walked in, quiet but determined. My original plan had been to confront Danielle slowly, one group member at a time, before ultimately revealing the truth about the kids. Emily, I knew, was burning with the desire to meet her biological father face to face. But in the end, I decided to ditch the script and just let the day unfold naturally. My main goal was clear: let the gang of 6 know I was onto them. That I had exposed everything, to their spouses, their peers, their employers. I wanted public humiliation. I wanted legal action. And I wanted them to squirm. Their spouses' stunned, furious reactions gave me a kind of twisted closure, and yeah, maybe even a little sense of triumph. Then, as I was sitting in the quiet aftermath of that chaos, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there stood my kids. The same 2 who had helped their mother into her room just days ago. Emily hugged me right away. Her arms wrapped around me with so much love and strength it nearly brought me to my knees. She looked up and said she knew I didn't want to talk about her mother. She understood that. But she needed me to know something. Danielle was broken. Emotionally wrecked. Emily had decided to take her back home the next day and give her a full week to pack her things before she returned to Atlanta. For good. Despite everything, despite all the lies and betrayal, Emily admitted she still loved her. I could see it in her eyes, that fierce, protective kind of love only a daughter could have for a wounded parent. And honestly, I respected her for that. I was proud of the woman she was becoming, strong, resilient, compassionate, even in the wake of devastation. Then Kent spoke. He said he loved me and hated what Mom had done to our family. And then he asked gently if he could come with me tomorrow. Back home. Without even thinking, I told him yes. Of course. I'd be glad to have him by my side. Emily stood up, gave me one last long hug, and said she'd be staying the night with her mom. I just don't think she should be alone right now, she whispered. Then, turning at the door, she said it. Daddy, I love you. And then she was gone. That night, Kent and I shared a few beers, just the 2 of us. We didn't say much, didn't need to. Then he went off to bed. It's been 5 years since I took down the gang of 6. Since I tore apart that carefully maintained lie they'd been living in for more than 2 decades. And honestly, life's been good. Those 6? They were all fired the week after the confrontation. One by one. No ceremony, no severance, just gone. Now they're divorced, broke, isolated. Their reputations follow them wherever they go, haunting any shot they have at rebuilding. Whenever they do land a halfway decent job, the past catches up to them, forces them to move on. Again. And again. I sometimes wish I could take credit for their misery, but the truth is, I'm not the only one keeping tabs on them. There's another structure, as Frank called it, quietly watching their every step. They're all trying to rebuild relationships with their kids. Trying to piece together something that resembles a life. But their exes only show up when they need money. And the bridges they burned? Most of them are still ashes. When I got back to Atlanta, I spent one night in the house. Just one. And that was enough. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. I knew I couldn't live there anymore. So I left. After everything, I ended up staying in a hotel for a while. Kent came with me to Atlanta for the move, but not long after, he headed out to Dallas, Texas, where he landed his first real job. He's been doing well, happy it seems. He's been promoted 4 times already. Still single, but dating, and he really enjoys the work. He's even thinking about joining my company this summer. It's been 5 years, but the relationship between them and their mother is still pretty strained. They talk on the phone now and then, but Ken hasn't seen her since we left Orlando. He and Emily, though, talk almost every day. The fallout from the Gang of 6 left deep scars, especially on the kids. I honestly don't know if Kent will ever be able to trust someone enough to get married. As for Emily, she took Donna with her to Naples for a week shortly after everything went down. But she wouldn't let Donna explain anything. She told her to save it for her therapist. Said she didn't want to hear what she saw as more lies. Emily's firm in her belief that there's no justification for what Donna did or the way she tore our family apart. Donna wasn't invited to Emily's private wedding or their first anniversary celebration. Emily and her husband Trey live in Atlanta now. She's not working for me, though she did join the company 2 years ago. Even so, I'm glad to have her close by. Turns out she has a real knack for business. And she made something else very clear to Trey from the beginning: if she ever found out he cheated, it'd be over. She knew too well what her mom had done. 8 months after we exposed the Gang of 6, all the spouses and kids met up in Atlanta. Being around people who had been through the same kind of betrayal, who were all trying to rebuild their lives, helped us heal. The kids, despite their different backgrounds, formed close bonds and still stay in touch. In 3 weeks, we're all meeting up again in Nashville. You know, when the Gang of 6 started cheating, they weren't just hooking up, they were switching partners each week. Emily and Kent were even named after George's mother and father, linking them forever to their biological dad. Even 5 years later, the relationship with Donna is still rough. Emily at least will meet her for lunch now and then, but Kent refuses to see her. Flat out won't do it. There was a time I was head over heels in love with Donna. But after learning the truth, that love just died. I know some guys never recover, but I'm not one of them. Life doesn't wait around. We can either give up, or get up. And I had kids who needed me. I needed them too. Donna kept the house. Said it was full of cherished memories she didn't want to let go of. I felt differently. That place had ghosts I wasn't ready to live with. I also settled things with George and Chuck. The money they gave me? I put it into trust funds for Emily and Kent. It was never about profit. It was about accountability. About making sure those men felt the weight of their actions. 6 months after the divorce was final, I started dating again. I wasn't rushing into anything. I just wanted to find someone kind. Someone I could love. Someone who might love me back. Until then, I wait. Patiently. And maybe one day Emily will give me a grandkid I can spoil to pieces. Here's what I've learned: cheating doesn't end well. It doesn't give you the freedom you think it does. It starts a cycle of destruction that just keeps spinning. Donna lost everything. Public humiliation, broken relationships, and karma came for her hard. She couldn't find steady work. Couldn't hold down anything meaningful. Right now, she's working as a cook at some fast food joint. A few weeks ago, there was a freak accident. Hot oil from the fryer spilled over her from the waist down. She's in the hospital now, her skin over 95% burned. Scalded alive. I can't even imagine the pain. She's under tight medical supervision. And as much as I thought I hated her, part of me just feels numb now. This wasn't the ending I envisioned. But it's the one we got.